Hello and welcome to Knitting Podcast episode 3. Welcome back. My name's Sophie and this is Sophie Knits Daily, and today I'm super excited to be doing episode 3 of my knitting podcast. Today I'm on the northwest coast of Scotland. We've just started the NC 500, which is a coastal route, a quite scenic, famous coastal route around the north coast of Scotland. We've been in Scotland for about 2 weeks now and it's been absolutely incredible. I am so surprised that Scotland's been right on our doorstep the whole time I've been alive, and I've just never been here or seen the landscapes. There's so many incredible mountains, coastline, lochs. It's just incredible. I recommend it to anyone. We've spent a week or so on the Isle of Skye and I visited a lot of the yarn shops there, so stay tuned for some Scottish Isle of Skye specific content. But today I am doing a typical knitting podcast. I'm going to run through what I'm wearing, finished objects, works in progress and acquisitions. So let's get started. What I'm wearing today is this Monday sweater. This isn't my Monday sweater, but it's a Monday sweater that I knit up for my boyfriend. I talked about this sweater in more detail in Knitting Podcast episode 1, so you can head back there at the end of this video if you want to hear more about it. But the concise details are, it's a Monday sweater by PetiteKnit. I knit it up on 4.5mm needles, which is half a size up from what the pattern recommends. I'm quite a tight knitter, and for any PetiteKnit pattern, I always go half a needle size up. So that's quite a common theme. I use West Yorkshire Spinners Jacob's DK in the colour medium grey, but I'd say it's definitely more a kind of brown leaning grey. Definitely in some lights, it looks far more brown. This jumper has had pretty much daily wear from my boyfriend for about 2 months now. I knit it up in time for his birthday in middle of February and it's holding up really well. There's some pilling, mainly kind of around the body under the armpits, but the pills pick off really easily and there's no felting under there at all. There's really good stitch definition, so I definitely recommend this yarn. Things that my boyfriend has said about this jumper is that it's super warm, it's somewhat water resistant. He says anytime he spills something on it, he can just wipe it and it comes straight off. And each time he wears it, it's getting less and less scratchy. Not that it was particularly scratchy to start with. Post blocking, he found the jumper quite comfortable to wear. So yeah, all of the good properties of wool that we absolutely love. And he definitely wants another jumper, so I think I'd stick to this yarn in the future. Yeah, strong recommendation from me. So moving on, I have one finished object. My finished object is the Semper Slipover by the Knit Purl Girl or Sophie Hemmings. This is a very straightforward and beginner friendly pattern. The construction is you work up the back panel with optional short row shaping. You then pick up the left and then the right, or the right and then the left sides of the shoulder, which you join together to form the front panel. You connect them together under the arms where you work in the round, and then you pick up the sleeves and the collar and work a 1x1 rib, which you then sew down as a sewn bind off. I knit size D on 4.5mm needles, which gives me a bust circumference of 92 centimetres pre-blocking, which gives me 0 positive ease. The pattern recommends between 0 and 5 centimetres positive ease, and I do wish I had slightly more ease. I was definitely looking for a slipover with a somewhat tighter fit than my other slipovers, but the 0 ease on this is just a bit more snug than I would like. I say pre-blocking because I haven't blocked this knit and I'm not entirely sure when I'm going to block this knit. A problem that I found with living in the van, in such a small van, is that I haven't found a good way to block my knits yet. I've come up with all sorts of ideas but haven't really followed through with any of them. One of them being to wash it and lay it out on top of the roof box of the van and let it dry up there, but you can't guarantee the weather in Scotland and we haven't had enough of a long dry spell in order for a wool and mohair knit to block. The other issue is I didn't bring any of my blocking mats or pins, so I can't block this and stretch it out with blocking in a way that I would normally do if I wanted some extra ease. The blocking would kind of plump up the wool but wouldn't stretch the knit out. It would just kind of block in the how it wants to be. So yeah, I haven't blocked it yet. I may be able to block it in a couple months and get a few more centimetres out of it, but I don't think I'm going to get much wear out of it in the van, which I'll come on to in a sec. So I haven't told you the yarn yet. The yarn is one strand of Malabrigo lace in the colour Cirrus grey, which is a lace weight yarn, and it's 100% baby merino wool, and it's in a kind of variegated grey colour range that's leaning on the blue side of grey. I held that with 2 strands of Drops Kid Silk mohair in the colour grey. I had to hold 2 strands of mohair with it to be able to get the gauge for the pattern, and I do have some slight regrets with holding 2 strands of mohair with the Malabrigo lace. So the first one is, I don't think you can see enough of the variation in the Malabrigo because the 2 strands of mohair mute that variation more than I would have liked. I absolutely love the Malabrigo yarn, and I did want something that had a more obvious variation, and I think with 1 strand you'd have been able to see that more. So that's my kind of first complaint. My second complaint is the 2 strands of mohair is, as you would imagine, very, very fluffy, as mohair is, and I think this is really beautiful, and the amount of fluff is really, really nice as a evening outfit or as a more dressy outfit, but it just doesn't fit into my wardrobe in the van whatsoever. I have very minimal clothes in the van, and I definitely don't have anything fancy enough to be wearing this. I think it's really, really warm, which would be helpful, but it just doesn't go with my outdoorsy gear, and I didn't really think before coming to bring a top that would look nice with underneath this vest. The only top that I have is a long sleeve black top where the arms of the top kind of join to the body as a drop shoulder, and I think it looks slightly odd with this vest as you have the shoulder of the vest here and then the shoulder of the top here, and it makes me look very kind of top heavy and wide. So I do have some clothes in my wardrobe at home that would look good with this vest, but nothing to wear with it now, which is a shame. So the pattern is very, very beginner friendly. As I said with the construction, it's kind of as simple as you can get with a vest construction. And the pattern is written up very, very detailed with quite detailed instructions as if it's a beginner's very first pattern or one of their first patterns. And I think that would have been absolutely amazing as one of my first patterns, and I would really appreciate those instructions. But I think for me now, having had a bit of experience with knitting, it's just too many instructions for me. I felt like I was skim reading paragraphs to try and find the information that I needed, and I was quite worried that I was missing important bits of information in that text. But I do really like the quite simple, basic, timeless fit and final product that it gives. The only change that I made to the pattern is the pattern recommends a tubular bind off for the bottom of the vest after the ribbon. I did initially do a tubular bind off, so I did the 2 double knit setup rounds and then the kind of sewn Italian bind off, and the final fit ended up being just really funny. I didn't get anywhere near enough stretch on the sewn bind off, so the vest was sucking in at the bottom. It made me look a bit, I don't know if this is a bit of a niche comparison, but I felt a bit like a baby in the Halloween pumpkin suits, where it was making me look very, very round and kind of sucking in at the bottom. But I think a lot of that was my fault. So my sewn Italian bind off is generally quite tight. There's 4 steps to the sewn bind off where you knit one off and you purl through the knit stitch, and then you purl one off and you knit through the purl stitch. And I do those 4 repeats in 2 stages. So I knit one off and purl through and then bring all the yarn through, and then I purl one off and knit through and then bring all the yarn through. So I think because I do that in 2 stages, I pull the yarn quite tightly, and it ends up that when I've got to the end, it forms a really, really tight bind off. So next time I do a Italian bind off, I'm gonna do each stage individually, so in 4 different steps, and see if that helps with my kind of tensioning and not pulling it too tight. So that's one area I could have gone wrong. The other thing that I think happened with this sewn bind off is with having 2 mohair strands, the mohair really stuck to itself and to the other strand, kind of like Velcro. So with the tubular bind off, where you're supposed to be able to see the stitches kind of round the bottom of the knit, the mohair was sticking together so much that you couldn't actually see the stitches, and it was just forming one mega stitch. And I tried my best while doing the sewn bind off to kind of rip the mohair apart and open that stitch up, but I didn't quite do it every single time, as it was quite laborious. So when I got to the end, I thought, oh, maybe I'll just pull it and stretch it out, the mohair will kind of come apart and it'll be fine. And I stretched it too much with a bit of frustration that my strand of Merino, the Malabrigo lace, broke. So I knew I wasn't happy with the sewn bind off, and by this point I had a break in the stitches anyway, so I had to undo it all, and undoing it all was a horrible process, but purely my fault and out of my frustration. And I could have gone in and done the tubular bind off again, but I just didn't have enough energy for that. I just wanted it to be done. So I ended up doing a bind off in pattern. So I knit the knits and purled the purls and brought the second stitch over the first to kind of, I'm not entirely sure what that bind off's called, but just like the simple bind off in pattern. And I think it looks really nice. It definitely kind of pulls out a bit more than the tubular bind off, but there's enough stretch to it and it seems to flow more naturally and nicer, and yeah, I just prefer the way that it looks. I also tried to modify the pattern by not doing the sewn bind off at the collar and the underarms initially. I think it was the collar that I started with, and I didn't really want to deal with the sewn bind off. I hadn't really done many before, so yeah, I just didn't want to do that. And something that I am more familiar with is picking up the stitch that you would be sewing through, adding it to the needle, knitting 2 together, and then doing your regular bind off by bringing one loop over the other, which I completed for the collar and hated the look. So I should have just followed the pattern initially. The reason I didn't like it is it created a really thick kind of ridge around the inside of the collar. Where you've picked up the stitch and knit, you've added slightly more fabric to that seam, and that ridge I found very irritating. I could like feel it on the back of my neck when I tried it on, and it just looked bulky. So I undid it, much easier to undo than before, and I did the sewn bind off, and I really love the look of the sewn bind off. It's really stretchy, surprisingly stretchy, and there isn't that big ridge there. There's less fabric, it looks more seamless, it looks very professional actually, and I would definitely be doing the sewn bind off again. I got a lot of practice in doing the collar and 2 sleeves, so I feel pretty comfortable with the technique now, and yeah, would definitely recommend just sticking with that in the pattern because it does look really nice. I think that's everything that I have to say about the Semper Slipover, so we'll move on to works in progress. So my first work in progress is the Dagmar zipper sweater by PetiteKnit. This is not easy to show you at all, as I have the ribbon on a really tiny needle at the bottom, but I've made quite a lot of progress on this since the last time. I think I just started the back panel on the last podcast, so I've knit pretty much all of the body at this point. I've just finished the ribbon and I need to do the tubular bind off, so I definitely use all my tips from last time, and I've also done the collar. I wanted to do the collar before moving house and leaving all my supplies in boxes, as I knew it wouldn't be an easy task, and I was definitely right in that. It was a lot more complex than I really realised. You have some double knitting panels at the sides where you kind of sew the zipper into, and this is a really long section of ribbon as it is folded over and sewn down. I was super surprised that the collar itself took up over a 50-gram ball of yarn. So there is a lot of knitting involved in just the collar, so I'm glad I got that out of the way. But going back to the actual pattern, I'm knitting this on 5mm needles, which is half a size up from what PetiteKnit recommends of 4.5mm needles. And I'm hoping to get around 30 centimetres of positive ease by knitting the size medium. I am using pure organic new wool, which is listed as a DK weight 100% British wool, but it knits up as more of an Aran weight, and I was able to meet gauge with it. It's in a really deep chocolatey brown colour, and I'm loving the way that it looks. I love these cables on a dark colour. I feel like the cables still really pop, but they're not so kind of in your face. And I think the brown works really, really well with my wardrobe. I love kind of autumnal and quite natural colours. So yeah, I really, really love the colour of this. So last time in the podcast, I spoke about finding it very, very difficult and labour intensive to do these cables. And I still agree with that. I think the cables are somewhat complex and definitely take a bit of concentration, but I've definitely got much more familiar with the pattern repeats and the cables now, and I can do full rounds without having to reference the charts, which I'm really, really happy about. I have put some things in place to make that process a bit easier, and I kind of wish I'd have done this video a bit earlier so you could have seen, but on the round, I put in different coloured stitch markers to alert me to where I was in the pattern. So between the different cable repeats, I put stitch markers so I could tell where this cable repeat started and this cable repeat started. And at the beginning of the round, I took this tip from Good Knits, who's also on YouTube. I used 2 stitch markers that were connected together of different colours. I had a red one and a yellow one, and my red stitch marker indicated that I was on what I termed in my head as being a red round or a bad round, which was a full cabled round, when most or all of the stitches were requiring cables, and my yellow round was a happy sun round where I just needed to knit or purl in pattern all the way around. So that kind of helped me to see which row I was on in the charts, and kind of I could just glance at the stitch marker and I'd be able to know what round I was on. I'm also doing these cables without a cable needle. I'm not sure if I said in the earlier video that I tried using a cable needle at the beginning and I found it really fiddly having the 2 needles of your normal knitting needles and then the cable needle as well. My stitches are kind of sliding off the cable needle, and I couldn't really get into a flow or a rhythm with it. So I tried cabling without a cable needle by just dropping the stitches and picking them back up, twisted either front or back, and I found it was really, really easy to do with this yarn. I definitely think the yarn choice I made is the most significant aspect in being able to do the cabling without the cable needle. The yarn is very rustic and sticky, so when I drop the stitches off the needle, the stitches don't drop at all, and even with a bit of tension in pulling up the stitches kind of to twist them, the stitches aren't unraveling, so really, really easy to do without a cable needle. And I also think it's helped by only having 1 strand of yarn. I think I'd struggle a lot more if I was dropping kind of 4 stitches of 2 strands of yarn and then having to pick up all of those different strands of yarn twisted. I think I definitely make more mistakes then and forget to pick up or miss picking up some of the yarn. So that's definitely a recommendation from me. If you're doing your first cable knit, use 1 strand of yarn and try and find a bit of a sticky, more rustic yarn. It'll make it a lot easier. I also didn't say earlier about the process of sewing in the zipper. So this zipper I got in a pack from Amazon a long time ago. I think I got it when I knit my Florence bag, and it's come in really, really handy for a few projects now. I found the process of knitting the zipper in a lot easier than I initially thought. So I placed it in with a few pins so that I kind of got it in the places that I want. I started sewing in from the top down, as the top was the bit that was trickier to do, making sure that the folded collar was lined up and kind of symmetrical on both sides. Once I got into the flow of sewing it down, it became really, really easy. I used a dark thread that looked in a very similar colour to the yarn, so you can't see the sewing at all. You can't see how poor the sewing probably is. It kind of just blends in. So yeah, I'm happy with that, and I think it's a really good outcome. It looks really nice. I like that it's a double folded collar at the top, so if you have the collar zipped down halfway, you can't see the inside of the zipper at all. You can just see the inside of the collar. It is until you zip it down all the way and it kind of comes out slightly that you can see the zipper. But I don't think that's a bad look at all. I think it looks quite professional, and I'm really, really happy with it. So all I have to do next is knit 2 sleeves. I think the sleeves will be really engaging, and they use the same cables and moss stitch as in the body of the knit. And now I've got more comfortable with those patterns and those cables, I think I should be able to fly through the sleeves. I really want this knit in my wardrobe right now, right this second. It's pretty cold here in Scotland. We've had some really, really chilly nights, and I would love to be able to throw this on. So this is my focus project. I'd really love to get it done. And yeah, just can't wait to see it as a finished object. So that is my Dagmar zipper sweater by PetiteKnit. My next work in progress is this Camisole number 9 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. This doesn't look nice at all to show you. It looks super, super messy, but this has been a very, very long-term whip. I think I started this September last year as a holiday knit, as it didn't take much yarn, so it was easy to throw in my suitcase when I went on holiday, kind of in exchange for a sock knitting pattern, which would be what I'd normally knit when travelling. But I've picked it back up recently as it's small enough to throw in the van, and it's kind of mindless knitting. It's really easy passenger knitting because I'm just knitting in the round of the body at the moment. So this is a very classic vest pattern. Knit on 3mm needles on fingering weight yarn. I'm using Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino in the colour Bark, and I'm knitting the size medium to hopefully get a bust circumference of 78 centimetres, which will give me a negative ease of 14 centimetres. It will be the garment for me that has the most negative ease of anything I've knit before, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to like the fit of so much negative ease, but I've got to try it out somehow, so this is the project to do it on. I really like the look and the feel of the cotton merino. It's a really, really soft yarn. It feels like it's just merino to touch. It's gonna be really nice and light and airy as a summer knit. So yeah, I'm happy I chose the cotton merino. I know it's really, really raved about, but it's obviously raved about for good reasons. So I'm excited to see kind of how it feels to be worn as a summer knit. So the way in which I've worked this pattern so far is I started with the left or the right strap, knit down the strap and part of the kind of neckline shaping, left that, knit the other side, and then connected the two together to form kind of the front panel. I then did the same for the back, and I've now connected them together in the body, and now I'm just knitting in the round stockinette until it's long enough. The only mistake that I made is when connecting the front straps to the back panel, you're supposed to pick up the stitches from the front strap and then work the back panel. I missed that in the instructions, so I just kind of cast on the stitches as a long tail cast on for the back panel and worked it up, and then realised I have a front and a back panel separately and the pattern's expecting them to be together. So I just sewed them together with the ends or the tails that I had of yarn, and I don't think you can really tell. The strap at the moment is so tiny that it's only about, I don't know, 6 to 10 stitches that I'm sewing together. So it's really, really minor. And the strap will get a bit wider once I knit up the armhole and knit up the collar. So I just don't think you'll be able to see where I've quite poorly sewn the two pieces together. So yeah, it's the same on both sides. I'm not unhappy about it. It is what it is. And I'm definitely not undoing all of this work on fingering weight yarn to rectify that. It looks fine. Yeah, this is a slow project, card knitting, just kind of easy knitting until I get onto the more laborious, complex task of doing the collar and the armholes. So yeah, I'm happy with this one, happy with the feel. I don't need it immediately. As I said, it's pretty cold in Scotland, so I'll just be working away on this slowly and hopefully it's ready in time for the summer. I think that is it for my works in progress. I did start the Jacques scarf by Laura Penrose. I used 2 strands of yarn that I'd intended to use for that pattern. Sorry, I just grabbed the label. So the yarn is Araucania yarns, which is hand dyed in Chile, and it's a sock yarn that is 75% wool and 25% polyamide, and I have it in the colours some sort of lime green colour and a colour called Misty Morning. I really loved working up this scarf pattern, which I have now frogged, and I'll go into detail of why, but nothing to do with the pattern. The pattern was such a joy to follow. I have absolutely no idea how Laura Penrose put it together. She is an absolute genius, because for the first few rows I was blindly following the pattern, wondering what on earth I was doing and how this was going to come together, and it ended up just looking beautiful, and the pattern was written perfectly, as always in her patterns. But you knit up a panel of double knitting with a panel of I-cord, and then you do kind of a garter stitch colour in the middle, and you use intarsia, which I've never done before, to do the coloured stripes in the pattern. The instructions are really easy to follow. Having never done intarsia before, I was a bit worried going into it, but the way that she writes the pattern is so easy to understand, and she links a YouTube video where she shows you in a bit more detail instructions on how to do that intarsia. So it was super easy to follow, and I was having so much fun knitting it up, and I was pretty heartbroken to have frogged it. But the reasons why was that I knit the pattern using 4mm needles as she recommends, but my gauge was so tight. I didn't do a gauge swatch because it's just a scarf. It takes as long to do a gauge swatch as it does to do the first 10 centimeters of the scarf, so I just went for it. And yeah, it was really tight. I wasn't getting the kind of drapiness that I could see that she had in her pattern photos, and I wasn't very happy with the kind of dense firmness of the scarf. So that was my first concern. My second concern is the colours ended up not looking particularly nice together, I didn't think. That's just my personal opinion, but because it's a finger and weight yarn and the pattern recommends DK, I was holding 2 strands of yarn together and holding 2 strands of the Misty Morning, the colourful hand-dyed like yarn together. It ended up looking quite muddy. I don't think it really made the yarn shine in the way that I wanted the yarn to, as the colours were all blending together. So I wasn't happy with that aspect, but I also wasn't happy with the way that the green and the colourful yarns looked together. I think it was a bit too bold for my wardrobe, and I'm not sure I really would have worn something so bright right next to my face. It's just not particularly my style, and I didn't want to have such beautiful yarn and a beautiful piece sitting in my wardrobe with no love and getting nowhere. So I frogged it, which I was so sad about, and I need to get thinking of other ideas of what to do with that yarn. I will definitely find some yarn to use for the Jacques scarf pattern though, because I absolutely love the pattern and I would happily knit it all again and maybe even make 2 or 3 because it was so much fun. So I recommend having a look at that pattern, it's lovely. So I just have a couple of acquisitions to show you, and I'm super excited about these. So I picked up these acquisitions in a charity shop in a place called Kyle, which is near the Isle of Skye. And I was over the moon to find 2 cones of Herdwick yarn. If you don't know about Herdwick sheep, they're very commonly found in the Lake District, which is where my boyfriend is from and where we spend a lot of time, the Lake District in the UK. And we see Herdwick sheep all the time. We had a picture of a Herdwick sheep in our bathroom for many years, and I've never seen their yarn being sold. I've never come across their yarn, and I've definitely never used their yarn, so I was so excited to find it. I have absolutely no idea how many grams are on these skeins. I don't have any scales, but both of the skeins say DK, which is surprising to me as one is much thinner than the other, but one says 7 nm Herdwick and one says 4NM Herdwick, and that's a term that I didn't really know about. NM, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, because I've never used cones before, and I think it's used quite commonly in machine knitting possibly, but with a little bit of Googling I found the 7NM is more like a lace weight yarn, and the 4NM is closer to a DK weight yarn. So yeah, two different weights, but they look very, very, very similar. Like they've come from very similar batches. So I think I could probably use them together in the same project. Herdwick sheep is notoriously very, very scratchy and itchy. It has a lot of vegetable matter within this yarn, so I don't think it's something that I can use for a garment, but something I could more so use for a home accessory, or something that's not going to be close to the skin. I would really love to knit up a tiny sheep toy or kind of figurine with Herdwick yarn, so have a little Herdwick sheep that I could put on the dashboard or something in Herdwick yarn, but I haven't found the perfect pattern for that on Ravelry yet. I've been looking at the designs by Garland on Ravelry. She released the pattern for the very famous, I think on TikTok, frog, and she doesn't quite have a sheep pattern that fits the style I have in mind. I would love it to look like that frog pattern and be kind of quite dainty and have a lot of personality. So I will keep searching for a pattern, or maybe I'll come up with my own someday. But for now, I just love looking at these. I love the connection that these yarns have to a place that is very, very special to me. Yeah, and I was just very, very happy to find it. And the best part of all is that for 2 cones, 50p. 50p, I couldn't believe it, blown away. So yeah, first acquisition. My second acquisition from the same shop, and also 50p, is this pattern book by Patons called Doublet. I had a little Google of this book and it was released in 1968, which is just amazing that it's in such good condition. And I'd really, really love to knit a pattern from this book. I think that would just be so interesting to see if I could kind of grasp the concept of a vintage knitting pattern and recreate a pattern from the book. In this book, there are a lot of really classic everyday patterns, some raglans, some turtlenecks, some zipper jackets, things that would look really, really timeless and still look trendy today, which is just amazing. Some patterns I really, really like from this book are polos for the farming life, which is, yeah, a really timeless raglan kind of mock neck, or you can make it into a turtleneck jumper. And zip around in these, which is a really beautiful kind of full zip cardigan. So yeah, I am getting a lot of inspiration from this book. I absolutely love the photos. It's really interesting to see the 60s style. And yeah, just very, very happy to find it. The yarn that this pattern book was written for is Patons Doublet, which is what's described as double knit yarn. From what I found on Ravelry, this is a bulky weight yarn where 50 grams are 55 meters. So I don't have any yarn in my stash that I could use for any of these patterns at the moment, but I'll keep that in mind. And I just love having this pattern book. It's beautiful, and yeah, really, really happy with my acquisitions from this video. So that's all I have for today for this Knitting Podcast episode 3. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you did like this video, then like and subscribe if you wish. And I really, really hope to see you again. Thanks for sticking around and have a good day. Bye.